Good morning, friends. The wind is with us this morning, at least here in Independence, so you may hear the wind chimes or the windows rattle with my words this morning. So hopefully you can hear me clearly. I'm so grateful to be with you today. So many that I know and love, and many others that I haven't met yet in person, but love because of this incredible global church that we call family. I had the pleasure of joining you all in person many years ago during your Mission Center conference to share an update from Outreach International about the Des Michel School that you all so generously supported following the earthquake in Haiti. While it's too bad that we cannot be all together in person once again, this is the next best thing, and there's no need to get on a plane, right? So this is, as Jennifer has reminded us, this is the third Sunday of Lent. It's World Hunger Emphasis Day. It's the day we focus on hearing God's guidance and the day that we join together in Holy Sacrament at the communion table, which today maybe is your counter, your side table, desk, or coffee table. No matter what, we know that it's sacred. When we think of hunger and feeling hungry, many can likely identify with this new era, not only the pure hunger for food and nutrition, but hunger to feel understood, to be heard, hunger for connection, for community, and also hunger for an experience with the sacraments. I'm so grateful that we get that opportunity today. All are welcome at this table. And today is our opportunity to celebrate again, recommitting to Christ's mission. The act of taking the bread and wine is our commitment to working together in community of Christ for God's preferred future. This concept of God's preferred future, I keep coming back to recently. If you recall, 2 weeks ago, the lectionary took us to Genesis and the theme of God's everlasting covenant of hope. God set a bow in the clouds as a covenant that will preserve and never again destroy life. But if we look at even our recent history, we've not made the same covenant with ourselves. With the severe divisions that we've created and so many that turn away from those in need, we destroy each other and the world around us. Humanity is not equally making the same covenant, nor upholding God's preferred future. If God's preferred future is about the preservation of life, then if we participate in that preferred future, we can hear and feel the echo of this covenant. We can be part of the preservation and healing of the world, where the hungry are fed and there is no more suffering. As I was thinking about our theme for today, hearing God's guidance, I thought of our enduring principle of continuing revelation, and that we individually and as a faithful community are called to witness and be guided by God's guidance in our lives today. And in the midst of the other important themes for our day today, Doctrine and Covenants, section 163, 4a, has guided me most. I'd like to read it for us. God, the eternal creator, weeps for the poor, displaced, mistreated, and diseased of the world because of their unnecessary suffering. Such conditions are not God's will. Open your ears to hear the pleading of mothers and fathers in all nations who desperately seek a future of hope for their children. Do not turn away from them, for in their welfare resides your welfare. We must not turn away from them, nor from God's preferred future, filled with hope and promise. Jesus set the example for that future, acting selflessly out of love, compassion, and justice for the oppressed, the marginalized, the poor, the other. For in their welfare resides your welfare. For me personally, this resonates. In my work at Outreach International, our interventions in the field are led by those living in poverty, those that are directly affected by their issues of poverty. This means that we at Outreach don't set the agenda, but instead engage the authentic participation of those directly affected to forge their own path toward development, organizational development, leadership, and resource network development. But at the heart is collective action to carry out the answer to the question, what is best for the common good? Another way of explaining this is with the common good approach to ethics, which assumes a society that is made up of individuals whose own good is inextricably tied to the good of the community, the whole. In the places where Outreach International is present, members of the community are driven by their common and shared experiences and are motivated by the resolution of their common issues of poverty. Now, you all, as a mission center, have contributed significantly to our partnership program over the years. Many of those years, your gifts were designated to the field work happening in the Philippines. So I'd like to share about an initiative there developed by the people that Outreach works with, and perhaps hear some of God's guidance. One of their common issues of poverty came to light as they together began talking about their lives and the difficulties that they face. You see, during hard times, many families who are hungry have no choice but to borrow rice at interest rates as high as 10% per month. This forces families into an inevitable cycle of perpetual debt. These high interest rates have brought many of Outreach International's supported community-based organizations to consider more affordable solutions for their families until they can become self-sufficient. Years ago, one such solution emerged. They would have their own rice loan, a microfinance initiative in which the community-based organization, their group, would purchase rice in bulk at affordable prices, and then families borrow the rice from their group at far lower interest rates, ensuring that they have enough rice through those leaner times of the year to keep hungry bellies fed. Rice is such an important part of the culture and history of the Philippines, and that's why everyone should be able to enjoy it. Outreach International has aimed to increase access by providing startup capital for rice loans, along with implementation support to those local community-based organizations that are managing their loans. This gives communities the chance to operate their own lending and borrowing programs without the burden of startup expenses. Now, we recently did a study of these impactful rice loans and found that between the years of 2008 and 2020, there have been more than 994,000 pounds of rice via 9,025 loans distributed to families. And there are currently 18 active loan programs in the Philippines. But having enough rice is only part of this story. Some communities have gone through dozens of cycles of these loans, which means the lower interest that's been collected each time a family repays their loan goes straight back to their community group to support spin-off projects, like generating other multi-purpose loan programs for purchasing groceries or paying for school supplies. Some groups have even been able to leverage the digging of water wells and building safe latrines. You see, the rice loans address hunger, food shortage, and provide spin-off capital for other projects, but they are also the venue for outreach facilitators to cultivate the local community-based organization and to build the capacity of up-and-coming leaders, a majority of them women, giving them financial and management skills and governing policies that ensure that their projects run smoothly and that they can continue to contribute and make a difference in their communities once outreach is gone. It's projects like these that remind us of their previous unnecessary suffering and ensures that parents who are always seeking a future of hope for their children can rest a little easier because their fellow community members are looking out for them and working together for their preferred future, for God's preferred future. Some of you may have read an article that I wrote in the Herald a few months ago, and I wrote about a colleague of mine in the Philippines, Krisa. She said, "So why did I choose this profession? Why did I choose to weep and get involved with the sufferings of the displaced and the mistreated? Why did I choose to take this enduring, painstaking journey with the poor? Why did I choose to love in the midst of inequalities? Because if I won't, who am I?" When I spoke with other facilitators like her in the field and listened to the core calling in them as facilitators of outreach's participatory process, it was like I was listening to Jesus. They were feeling called to be with the people, live with them, listen to them, learn from them, help them if they could, plan with them, take action with them, helping them realize the power, confidence, and ability that has always been in them, just lying dormant. I remember realizing this. It was my first visit to the Philippines in 2013. These facilitators working there and around the world, they are quite literally the hands, feet, and heart of Jesus Christ, living out his mission every single day. Are you hearing God's guidance? We all know there hasn't been, nor will there be, much opportunity to travel to the Philippines in the next few months. But that doesn't mean that there isn't suffering still nearby. The pandemic has been earth-shattering for so many, but we've been given an opportunity to reset what we believe is normal and respond to that hunger for connection in new and different ways. When we work for justice, listen to the oppressed, advocate for the marginalized, and lift up the voices of the poor, we're making way for Christ's mission in that preferred future. I recently discovered a video that features a poem or a spoken word song of sorts that's quite incredible. It's called "Is Justice Worth It" by Micah Burns. I strongly suggest you look it up, Micah Burns. He says, "And people always ask, is it even worth it? And that question, though understandable, it's, quite frankly, it's ridiculous. And it rarely comes from those who are actually tired from pursuing justice. It rarely comes from people who've labored for years and have good reason to ask it. And you know why they never ask? Those types of people become friends with those who suffer, family even. Because it's one thing to wonder if someone else's freedom is worth fighting for. But when you begin to identify with that someone else, commune with them, that's when the question is no longer worth asking. He ends the piece with, "You never stop fighting for your own." And listening to his voice, I'm sure it will rock you as it rocked me. We must never stop fighting for our own. Our brothers and sisters, every child, every elder, every person on this earth that suffers. So as you come to the communion table, the counter, the TV tray, or whatever sacred place that you have set today, as you continue on your Lenten journey, remember this is our time to recommit to Christ's mission, to upholding God's preferred future where we don't turn away from suffering and we know that our welfare resides in the welfare of others. Thank you.
The first one comes from Mary Jacks, and it is going to be, where are you active in Outreach International lately, and where is the need so strong this time?
Well, it's a really good question. So we are active. Our facilitators are still actively doing their work, even amidst the pandemic. The work looks a little different, as you would expect. In pretty much all of the locations where outreach is present, there have been restrictions on community gatherings, meetings, and things that normally are the venue for a lot of great development and growth and project planning and implementation and things. There's a lot of new approaches that facilitators are learning to continue to have that same community dynamic, but in a safer way. Of course, always wearing masks and trying to stay as distanced as possible. But we actually have a really cool report that we've just put out. It's on our website under Get Resources down at the bottom. That's entirely about COVID-19 and some of the things that we are learning as an organization from our facilitators and from the leaders in our communities to adapt to the situations locally. So there's kind of some cool stuff to check out there. In terms of where the need is, it's often hard to kind of focus when the need is kind of everywhere. So we're present. We're doing our core process in 9 different countries around the world. All of which are affected by the same things that we're being affected by and more, with the poverty conditions that Shani had outlined and that many of us can imagine in rural poverty. So yeah, I think it's hard to really focus in on one specific place that's needing more support and attention over another. But if you have any other questions about that, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. So the next question comes from Dave and Carolyn Brock, and
Mhm.
it's actually going to be a two-parter. The
Okay.
first one is, can you teach us how to best pronounce your name?
Okay. Would love to. It's Andrea.
Yeah. Okay, Andrea.
Yeah.
And the second part is that they say, since some of us haven't kept up so well with the annual OI report, can you give us a quick overview of what countries OI is now working in and what some of the key projects are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in Central and South America, we are in Nicaragua and in Bolivia. Nicaragua has had some great things happening lately. There's a new clinic that's been implemented in one community there that's making significant strides to help community members. In Bolivia, they just had a huge opportunity to access significant resources from the government for irrigation and agricultural inputs. And we also have, so I'm now looking at the map. So in Haiti, as you know, we have the school program that we've supported for many years through much of your generosity, which is continuing to operate. They've had some challenges through the lockdown earlier in 2020, but things appear to be returning to normal there. In Africa, we're in 3 countries, in Zambia and Malawi and the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's a lot of great things happening there. Would encourage you to check out our blog. There's a lot of great projects and things that are highlighted on the website. In Asia, we are in India and Nepal. And in Nepal, there's actually been some exciting new tunnel farming endeavors. So with the climate there, they've built a great deal of these wonderful little tunnel structures for producing vegetables year round and being able to access seedlings and things and distribute those for others. And it's been an income generating opportunity for those in the communities there. Also in Asia, the Philippines and Cambodia. And in the Philippines, as I said, the rice loans are still very, very active there. They actually, one community just accessed a significant amount of books for a school in one of their communities, and I think there's something on the blog about that as well. Um, but yeah, that's where we are, and some of the things happening lately.
Cool. So we have a question from let me find it again. We have a question from Chris and Eric Lasley about are there currently any volunteer opportunities overseas with
Mm.
Outreach International?
Yeah, good question. And this can be sometimes a little um, disappointing for some folks because we don't really have a lot of opportunities for volunteering in the countries where we are. Unless, however, there is professional experience that you can offer that the community itself has identified a need for. Because we have had opportunities where we can connect people that have the resources and technology and things that they're really seeking out. But because we are out at Outreach are really trying to strengthen the networks that they have locally so that when we leave a community, they know who to contact and who to reach out to when they have a problem they need to solve without our support. So it can sometimes be a little challenging for those of us who really love to travel and want to be helpful. Um, but ultimately, that's what we're trying to lift up, at least when we're in the communities there. That doesn't mean that there aren't sometimes opportunities to travel, and that the traveling might not include volunteering, but that's just something to watch out for at Outreach. On occasion, we have some site visits. We haven't had any lately, and nor do we really have lots of opportunities coming up. But do keep in touch.
Okay. So there was I mean there was a question from Jennifer Richmond about our project still ongoing in the field for OI, and so it sounds I'm assuming that's during the pandemic. Is
Mm-hmm.
that probably the context of that question is what I'm assuming. But I think you kind of are answering that already. So I'm gonna kind of couple that with this question from Lynn and Kathy Sharp, and that is we know that Haiti has many challenges. Our Haiti schools with which the church and OI are associated meeting in person, and
Right.
how is COVID affecting direct education?
Yeah. So Haiti has not been as strict in the restrictions, at least lately. In-person classes have been continuing there. I know in the early months of lockdown, Outreach worked closely with Community of Christ to make sure that the funds that were supporting the feeding program actually went to providing food kits for families that were in much dire need um, for food and resources and materials to be able to cook and things. Um, I believe there were 300 families, not just the students, of course, but the whole families that were benefiting from those at that time. More recently, just a little update, and this doesn't necessarily address the question directly, but just for your understanding, because I know you guys all care about the school program there. Um, as you may have heard, Augustin Durat, who was the school program coordinator for the entire school program in Haiti, he passed away at the end of 2019. And so everyone, of course, was rocked by that news. And it's been quite a challenge to actually replace him in the leadership that he provided to the school program. And so what the good news is that we just in the last week have brought on two new school program coordinators to take over his role that had been more interim, being led by Mission Center leadership in the interim. So now we have two new, very excited, young, enthusiastic, and skilled folks that are stepping into that role that will be supporting the North and the South mission centers in Haiti that have so many schools. We currently have 63 schools that are supported through ongoing monthly remittances for teacher salaries and other things. And then we have 19 schools that are a part of the feeding program that are receiving a hot meal every day. So currently that's kind of where we're at.
Cool. Thank you for the information. I also I have one question on the queue ready to go. if there's anybody else that has any more questions, please message them to me. We still have a little bit of time left, and so we're only about 9 minutes into our 20-minute Q&A. So if you have questions, we have time. So please send them my way. So this comes from Lynn and Kathy Sharp again, and that is, at one time, Outreach International was eager to find projects to do in North America. Is that still the case? Is there any progress on that front?
Yeah. So I think there's still, of course, interest and desire to do so. I wouldn't say that we currently have the resources to tap into some of those desires. And what we too, I think it can sometimes be a logistical and philosophical kind of challenge, I think, for us at Outreach as well, because what we've learned from some projects in the past is that supporting supporting projects and especially staff in North America is so much more expensive than supporting efforts in other parts of the world. And so we sometimes find ourselves realizing, well, is the work that's happening in North America more valuable than the work that's saying, let's say, in Malawi and other places? And because we have um, to respond fairly and given the context and the local conditions, it can be really challenging just in terms of resource allocation and management. Um, that said, I think there's always openness to discussion and dialogue about what could come from working more in North America. So I'm not sure if that addresses your question, Kathy and Lynn, but feel free to ask any follow-ups that you might want.
Okay, so this um I think this question this comes from Jennifer Redfern, and this is regarding areas in the world where I think is it desertification has occurred. Is OI involved in soil regeneration projects alongside other agencies?
Really good question, Jennifer. As far as I'm aware, there's a couple of locations where I know communities have identified the issue of um, clear cutting and soil degradation and things, most specifically in Bolivia and in Malawi. Um, I know in Bolivia, I believe that they have been working with the local government to be able to respond to some of that. I can't speak to in Malawi where, and if Shania were on here, she may know because she was there actually since I've been there. She's been there more recently. Um, but I know I have visited a community in Bolivia, the community of Sapilica. It's at the top of a big hill, and it's as desolate, like um, deserted as you can imagine. There's very little trees, but there is a family there that, with the support of that local government and some of the support from outreach, were able to plant, I believe it was close to like 1,500 trees on the property where they're there. And to hear him talk about the story of his land and the soil and how it changed over time is quite remarkable. And he actually talked about how they don't have much there, but that these trees have become his legacy for his children. And I remember that hitting me so strongly. That's immediately what came to mind when you asked your question. So, and they are able to harvest mushrooms from under the trees there, that they can either sell fresh or dry and sell in the local market. So it's a not only wonderful for the environment and the soil, but also an income opportunity for the family there too.
This next question comes from, it says Carl. I'm assuming this is Carl Gann. And if I remember correctly, you were with you volunteered, right, with Orphans Africa?
Yeah, years ago, but yes.
So he asked, how do you like your job? And he said, yes, it is Carl Gann. How do you like your job, and what is the most difficult part of your job?
Oh, goodness sakes. Yeah. Well, Carl and Michelle, wonderful to be with you virtually after so many years. I am so so grateful for the job that I have. I feel incredibly blessed to be able to do the work that I do and to interact with the people that I get to interact with on a daily basis. I uh, I've now, it's hard to believe, I've been with outreach for a little over 10 years, and that job has changed over the years. Of course, I started, some of you know, from when I was out there in the early, I think it was 2012, maybe, when I was with you guys. Um, that I started off supporting the rebuilding efforts in Haiti because my background was in architecture, and I worked in tandem with Outreach International and Community of Christ at that time. And the role then evolved into being able to support Outreach International's overall programs much more holistically, and getting more into participatory human development, which I've been so grateful to learn from. And so, yeah, I love my work and my job. I think the most difficult part is, I think, kind of gets back to that question of Kathy and Len a little bit, not necessarily specific to North America, but just the allocation of resources, and realizing how difficult it can be to make those hard decisions when there's so much need in the world, trying to prioritize the areas where we know we can make the biggest difference. And sometimes that means making harder decisions about where we can't make as much of a difference as we would like to. Um, but there's always, of course, hope. There's been a couple of times in the last few years where we have had to withdraw from a few partnerships that we've had, but those have always been with strong commitment from the local folks there, and also from outreach, to make sure that the um, the legacy that's there and the communities that we have worked with are strong enough to be able to sustain themselves. It means that we can't go into newer communities, but that the communities that we have worked in are at least in a strong state to be able to continue without us. So, yeah.
Great. So Brenda Sargent asks, are you bilingual or do you use interpreters?
Um, Such a good question, and I wish that I had more language skills than I do. I can't say that I'm bilingual. I know a lot of basic conversation in a lot of different languages, but not enough to actually be able to get into the nitty gritty, so to speak. So we do work with a lot of translators in most of the work that we're doing, especially when traveling. Most of our facilitators that are part of the partner staff that we work with, many of them speak English, not all of them, but many of them do. And on my team, I have multiple folks that are bilingual as well. A few Spanish speakers, one that's getting very proficient in French, and yeah.
We have two more questions left. One is the first one is that Bill Campbell asks, what factors go into choosing which country
Mm.
that you guys will provide support to?
Yeah. So we, as you may know, back in 2016 was when we actually began working in a couple of new countries. So one being Nepal, another being Cambodia. Typically, when we are entering into a entirely new context, like going into a new country, we're looking at various factors. I know Kevin Prine, our CEO, really likes to lean upon the prosperity index, the Legathum prosperity index, which really starts to highlight where countries are on a variety of different indicators. But we know our process to be most successful in the kind of in the significant poor, but not like devastating and violent levels of poverty. And so in countries like the Philippines, like Malawi, are all kind of in that sweet spot, we like to say, of where we can really make a significant difference. And then it's always also dependent upon the connections that we have on the ground, that we not only trust and believe to be committed to the type of work that we do, but knowing that we have long-term partners that are present there that we can tap into. to utilize our process and that are open to learning potentially a new process and way of working. So that's kind of the approach that we took in both Cambodia and in Nepal, and have found really strong partners to work with both there.
We did have one extra question in addition to the last question slide in, so I'll get that one, but I'll ask everybody to please no more questions since we are there. So that was, does Outreach International work with other groups like Doctors Without Borders or Amnesty International or et cetera?
Yeah, really good question. And yes, we do. We've actually learned, especially over the last 5+ years, that outreach can't do everything alone. And we've learned that we're experts when it comes to the process and to ensuring sustainability in a community, but we are not experts when it comes to certain types of projects and different poverty issues. And we know that there are a lot of other really wonderful, qualified organizations out there that are experts in those projects. So we've worked significantly in Nicaragua with Engineers Without Borders for different water projects, and they've worked closely with the local, what they called the Engineers Without License, which is basically the local masons and things that know how to build things and get things done. They worked together to be able to build composting latrines in many of the communities down there. Like, I think we're in the hundreds of latrines that have been built. Also in Cambodia, actually, we're working really closely with Habitat for Humanity. There's many new homes that have been constructed through Habitat, but our facilitators are really encouraging the local community groups to be that much more involved in advocating for what they need from Habitat. And the relationship there, I think, has been a really wonderful one. But yeah, there's a lot of different organizations that we've gotten close with over the years. Rotary Club, Rotary International, and I'm trying to think of any others that are popping up. We're trying to get closer in with Heifer International. We've actually been really closely tied with a number of other organizations through a local, or not a local, but a new network that Outreach is getting very active in, called the Movement for Community-Led Development. Might be worth checking out, mcld.org. It's a really fantastic network of different member organizations, and you might even recognize some of our photography on there as well. Because we've gotten so active in there, they love our photographs and like to use them to represent community-led development for some of the work that they're doing. So yeah, it's all about working together to get things done and being able to make a difference in the lives of the people that we serve. So
Did you say that was mcld.org? Okay,
mhm.
so I'm gonna drop that in the chat and then offer the last question, which is coming to us from Lisa Meath, and that is, what might be examples of specialized skills or knowledge that would be useful for our volunteers to further needed projects?
Yeah, so let's see. I think some of the examples that I've even mentioned from these organizations, like Engineers Without Borders, if there's engineering capabilities that maybe are not accessible locally. We've had actually, it was one donor who specializes in water purification and filtration. That's made a lot of filters available, and he's been traveling to Nicaragua in recent years to support some of the issues and solutions that have been identified by the community. Let me see. Yeah, there's not that many great examples of folks here in the U.S. that have been identified to volunteer and go with those specialized skills, but it's not as if we're closed off to that opportunity. So I think it really just depends on what skills are available that might be well suited for the issues that have arisen in different communities. So yeah.
Thank you so much for not just sharing with us this morning in the worship, but for being willing to stay on after for this Q&A. This is our first time doing this on a Sunday morning, and we hope to do this again occasionally in the future with some of our guest ministers. But again, we really want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you,
I'm
Sean.
going to give everybody a chance here in a moment to those that are on to say goodbye. So I'm going to give us the opportunity to unmute ourselves in just a moment.
Such a
You just got muted though, Andrea, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say it's such a huge pleasure to be with all of you today and to see and hear from so many familiar faces and names that I love very dearly and haven't seen in so long. And so it's just wonderful to be with you all.